Welcome to the August 10th, 2012 episode of Concealed Wisconsin Radio, a show about guns, Wisconsin, and you. This episode of Concealed Wisconsin Radio is sponsored by Cleveland's Holsters, made of 100% American manufactured materials with a 100% lifetime guarantee. These comfortable holsters are Wisconsin-made, and believe me, they won't disappoint. Head on over to concealedwisconsin.com/holsters to check out their selection and order yours today. Welcome to another episode of Concealed Wisconsin Radio, delivered to you from an undisclosed studio hidden in northwestern Wisconsin, where it's still safe to talk about politics, guns, and God. Today we're going to have a great show, so thanks for joining us. As always, we've got a lot to cover, so get ready. I'm the host of Concealed Wisconsin Radio, Andy Anderson. All right, everybody, welcome back to Concealed Wisconsin Radio. It's been a long time since I've done a show, and I am attempting to do a couple things different. One of the things that I'm hoping to do is include our audience. We have roughly just under about 800 followers on Facebook, and things are moving along. I get a lot of individual connections with people that may comment on YouTube or on the blog or whatnot. But I would like to enhance that by getting some of the conversation that happens on Facebook to happen in a way that more people can participate, mainly with the podcast and the radio show. So what I would like to encourage people to do as you're listening to this show is just take note of a couple things. First of all, we do have a Twitter account and a Facebook page that tends to be the most active place where you can get involved. But if you want to be part of a show and you have a question or a comment or something like that, you can call our feedback hotline at 608-305-GUNS. And I'd encourage you to leave a comment, and then I can play that as part of the show and get you more involved. There's been a lot of really interesting and tragic things happening inside the news with regards to guns and politics. But today I really want to focus on the tragic mass murder that occurred in Aurora, Colorado just a few weeks ago. And that was my intention for today's show. And although we're going to get to some other items too, I want to spend some time discussing this in a little bit of depth. We also have a guest coming up on the show, and so you're going to want to stick around for that. We'll be introducing a special guest that has a lot of insight into some training as well. So if you want to keep up on the current news of the day, be sure to go to Concealed Wisconsin on Facebook, and that's where we're putting a lot of content up every day, and we're just not going to have time to cover all the things that have been happening in the news in this episode. Now, while preparing for today's show, I became aware of another mass shooting, and this time it was here in Wisconsin in the city of Oak Creek on August 5th. And it was at the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, and it just blew me away, and it just took my breath away. It's always a tragedy to see these things happen. When it happens this close, when you're inside the same state, there's an emotional tie to that. It also happened at a religious organization's temple. And because I go to church and I choose to carry at church, that was a wake-up call for me as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before I get into Oak Creek, I want to read the blog article that I wrote about Aurora just after this tragedy occurred, and talk a little bit about that, and then tie that into what happened here in Wisconsin. I, like many of you, were shocked by the events of July 20th, 2012 in Aurora, Colorado. My eyes were glued to the TV as details came out about the shooting at the Century 16 Theater and the innocent victims of this unbelievable attack. It took me several hours to even break my silence and make comments on Facebook and it will likely take even more time to grasp the depth of the tragedy that took place. Concealed Wisconsin would like to offer Wisconsin's condolences to the victims and families of those who lost their lives in this terrible tragedy. 12 individuals murdered, and so many others whose lives will never be the same. We hope and we pray for your speedy recoveries and physical and emotional healing. In the days to come after this tragedy, there will undoubtedly be those who will try to politicize it for their own agenda. There will be attempts to make guns the enemy and take the focus off the evil that perpetrated this crime. Concealed Wisconsin hopes our community can remain civil and keep a respectful tone as people try to put their lives back together. As is appropriate, yes, we will begin to evaluate and debate the specifics of this event and how it will pertain to gun owners and concealed carry in Wisconsin and across America. We'll continue to defend our constitutional right to bear arms and discuss the realities of our current system. We'll expose the flawed thinking of anti-gun persons who declare fault with the gun and not with the psychotic individual who used the gun, who should be held responsible. We'll continue to follow this story and learn from the tragedy in hindsight, and we'll continue to encourage law-abiding citizens to legally arm themselves, to protect themselves and others from having to experience this carnage themselves. And we'll continue to promote the sheepdog concept and promote standing in the gap for others who are unable to protect themselves. We will continue to promote obeying the law, being a good person, and being prepared. We will continue to promote not only getting your CCW, but practicing a consistent high percentage of carry. For now, however, we need to be vigilant and not let the bad guys win. Now, oddly enough, I wrote this in the wake of the Colorado shooting, and it was just a short few weeks later that this letter would be turned and we would be looking at it from a completely different perspective. As I gave my condolences from a Wisconsinite's perspective, now I see this happening here in Wisconsin. And it rips you to the core when you see that someone would go into a safe zone or a gun-free zone, which we know is completely false, and attack unarmed people. And so we're going to give our condolences to the Oak Creek victims and their families, and wish them well and wish them healing as well. I'm going to introduce a special guest to kind of bring some highlights to some of these items. And so joining me on the phone right now is Dominic Ferraro, and he's the president of Advanced Protection Group, LLC. Advanced Protection Group provides personal defense training, specialized law enforcement training, private security solutions, and investigative consulting services. Their group consists of current and former law enforcement officers, investigators, certified firearms instructors, military personnel, firefighters, insurance adjusters, and security experts. You can see why I wanted to bring Dominic back on the show. If you remember, Dominic was on a previous episode back when the concealed carry law was first passed. And just to note, this is a family-owned and operated company. It's located in central Wisconsin with associates strategically positioned throughout the state to ensure maximum coverage and efficient operations. Dominic, welcome back to Concealed Wisconsin Radio.
Hey, Andy. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you here as well. And, I brought you on the show because of the tragedies that have happened both in Aurora and now in Wisconsin. And many people have contacted me and asked for my opinion on how these things are going to affect carry in Wisconsin, if I think that there's going to be some changes to the law, or if the federal government's going to come down on with new regulations and whatnot. And I thought I would bring in an expert who probably knows a lot more about it than I do and could speak to some of those things. But before we get going on some of the other topics, just what are some of your thoughts on what's been happening inside of Wisconsin and Colorado?
Well, we live in a changed society, and I know those of us that are patriots, that believe in concealed carry, believe in the Second Amendment, we're awake. We know what's going on. And I think when we see these mass shootings out in Aurora and here in Wisconsin, it's going to serve to open people's eyes and let them realize that the world is not a safe place. America is not necessarily a safe place. And ultimately, you do have to take responsibility for your own personal safety. But Wisconsin is no stranger to active shooter events. Particularly in a church. If you think back to Terry Ratzman, this guy was a dirtball that shot up a church, the Living Church of God. He killed the minister and 6 others, including the minister's son. And at the end of that active shooter event in Wisconsin, he killed himself. As we are learning happened in here recently in Wisconsin at the Sikh temple. The shooter in the end ended up taking his own life as a coward. So we're dealing with evil cowards. We need to take responsibility for our own personal safety, and we need to never let our guard down when it comes to dealing with that evil, but when it also comes to dealing with the secondary evil, which is the knee-jerk reactions of the people who oppose our right to defend ourselves. They're going to continually use these shootings and the shootings that I'm sure are going to happen in the future. This stuff's not going to go away, as a means to try and take away our rights or to make it very difficult for us to exercise our rights. So we're dealing with evils on multiple levels. We need to keep level heads. We need to all be calm, and we need to do the right thing. And that's to continue to defend ourselves, our families, and our rights.
Now, Dominic, I appreciate the fact that you did not name the shooter, and I've made it a point not to put his name anywhere on my website or on Facebook, and I certainly am not going to mention it here. He is a coward, and I put that in quotes, and so he will remain nameless. However, the victims of these crimes, many of them are heroes, and especially the stories coming out of Colorado, we saw boyfriends and husbands or individuals that were on dates that were covering their girlfriends and their friends and taking bullets for them. And even in the Sikh temple, the individual who was the president, it sounds like he went after the guy to disarm him with a butter knife. And it's stories like that are sickening, because in a world where we have gun-free zones, and I don't know that the Sikh temple was necessarily posted or not, but definitely the theater was. And in a state that has concealed carry available, to not be able to carry in that theater is really a tragedy, and something that we need to evaluate. And like you said, with the knee-jerk reactions from the politicians and from the individuals at the top of these corporations that decide we're just going to post because it's going to make us feel good, that really does nothing for our safety. Have you gone and seen the Batman movie by any chance?
Yes, actually, I saw it about 3 days after the shooting in Colorado.
Okay, I went and saw it on Sunday, and the reason that I went and saw that movie was really part because I really like action flicks, but part of it was kind of a personal statement for myself to say, you know what, these cowards are out to make us afraid, and I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna overcome that to be able to say that he didn't get the best of this part of Wisconsin. And so I went. Unfortunately, as I went and I was looking at the news on my phone, I saw that there was another mass shooting, and some of the revelations of that day on Sunday came out. Did you carry when you went to the theater that you were at?
There's not a time where I'm not carrying.
Good for you.
But I not only did I bring my normal amount of ammunition, I did bring an extra magazine just in case. And some people will say, "Well, that's a little paranoid." Well, I'd prefer the term prepared. You never know what's going to happen. You never know when we're going to have copycats. And like I said, this active shooter scenario is going to repeat itself over and over again. It's not going to go away. And going to the church, going to your church on the weekends or whenever you practice your faith, going to the movies, going about your daily life. You're right. That is a statement that needs to be made. You need to do it for yourself. You need to do it for your family. Don't be afraid. Just be prepared, and be ever vigilant.
Right. Well, and I too carried. I made sure that my local theater did not post, and so I had on me a firearm with an extra mag. I also had a very good flashlight that would have lit up the theater if need be, whether it be to find my keys that I dropped under the seat in the ooey gooey mess, or whether it be to light up somebody who decided to be stupid and start shooting in a theater. But I think that those are some key components to an everyday carry scenario. I think everybody should have some way to light up a dark situation, some sort of a flashlight. A firearm is always a bonus, but not always available, and some sort of a blade that can be used either in self-defense or in some other means, first aid or whatnot. Those at a minimum are things that you'll always be able to find me carrying if you were to stop me on the street and say, hey, gun check, what are you carrying today? I'd be able to describe exactly what I'm carrying to someone like yourself, a fellow gun enthusiast. And we're continuing our discussion with Dominic Ferraro, and he is bringing us a little bit of insight into his thoughts on the tragedies in Colorado and in Wisconsin with the mass murders from the cowards that decided to go into a gun-free zone and shoot unarmed individuals, and then, as in Wisconsin, take their own life and not even face the prosecution of the crime that they committed. And it was interesting because as I'm following these different stories, Dominic, there was a letter that was published by a local sheriff in one of the counties in Wisconsin, in Dodge County. And I would love to have him on the show even to talk about this, but I thought it was pretty interesting what he wrote, and I'm going to read at least part of the letter that he posted in the paper. But it was titled, "What Would You Have Done?" And it says, each day we are exposed to circumstances and events in which we should review and ask ourselves, what would we have done? The recent tragedy in Colorado is exactly such an event, and as your sheriff, I have already asked myself numerous questions about our ability to respond and mitigate an active shooter call. All I can say is we train for these events and have policies, protocols, and equipment to do so. Let's hope at most we ever have to do is train for such an event and never respond to one. Now, this was written before the Sikh temple shooting. I don't know if I mentioned that, but this was written before this, and it was published in the Beaver Dam paper after the Colorado shooting. Currently, we are in the middle of a 3-year program developing a uniform response to active shooters in our schools and should be ready to roll that out very soon. I can assure you, should such a tragedy occur in Dodge County, the response would be robust, including law enforcement, fire, and EMS. This includes resources from all local and state agencies as well as adjacent counties. Okay, for all of you, what if it had happened in the theater? Now, most experts advise potential victims to do whatever they can to aggressively flee the room or area and rush to safety. If there is a shooter and you cannot flee, crouch low so that you do not lie flat on the floor. Bullets are likely to ricochet and travel along flat surfaces, so the smallest footprint you have on the floor, the better. Now, grenades are different, so try to lie down and stay flat as grenades explode upward. Therefore, the lower you are, your profile, the better. He continues and he says, for all you concealed carry holders out there, yes, I know the theater was posted no weapons, but let's assume it was not. 2 choices, flee to safety or stand up and defend yourself and protect others. The theater is full of people who are now running and crawling to the exits, and a heavily armed perpetrator is firing indiscriminately into the crowd. a chaotic situation. The first option is to run. You are outgunned and the guy is in full body armor. Neutralizing this guy would have been possible but tough. Second option, stand, draw, and engage. Give him all you got and hope he doesn't get you before you get him. But then again, he's armored and has now identified you as his lone threat and directs all he has at you. You're also trying to squeeze rounds while shaking uncontrollably and coughing from tear gas. Hundreds of people are running towards the exits and bumping into you. What confidence do you have in your ability to ensure you do not strike the innocent? You have at best 6, 8, maybe 15 rounds. He has hundreds. Dozens of law enforcement officers respond to the 911 calls and arrive at a very chaotic scene. Will they readily recognize you as the good Samaritan who's trying to neutralize the bad guy, or will 911 callers report 2 shooters? Once police arrive, drop all weapons and lie flat on the floor. Allow yourself to be handcuffed for a time for law enforcement to sort it out. A lot to think about in seconds that you'll have to make these life-changing and possibly life-ending decisions. I'm not writing this to tell you which option you should or should not take if you are ever confronted with this scenario. My intent is to ask you to review and ask yourself what you would have done. There are options. Each may end differently. Will you be willing to sacrifice your life to save another? All right, so this is from one of the county sheriffs in Wisconsin just before the tragedy in Oak Creek. Dominic, what are your thoughts on this, and kind of break it down from a training perspective? Because obviously you train individuals in concealed carry, you train law enforcement, and you're in the protective services. Is he right? Is he somewhat right? Did he miss the mark? Give me your professional opinion on that.
Sheriff Nels, I think he did a very good job with a limited amount of space. I mean, we could spend hours talking about active shooters and what do you do. But what I think the best part of this letter that he wrote is, I think his intent was to get people thinking, to get people to realize that there is a chance that you're going to find yourself in a bad situation like an active shooter, and you need to know ahead of time how you're going to react or what you're going to do. What is your plan? So I think he gave some interesting tips in there, as far as don't lay flat on the floor if bullets are traveling in your direction due to ricochets, and what to do about grenades. And I believe Sheriff Nels is a military veteran, so he does have some background in that. I don't think it's a bad letter. I think you need to realize, especially in an active shooter situation, that if you do stand up and fight, there's a very good likelihood that you will be injured or killed. But you need to have the mindset that if you are shot, that you can survive that, and that you will survive that, and that you're going to follow through with your intention of taking out that shooter at all costs. Concerns about shooting innocent bystanders. Well, in a situation like Aurora or any active shooter situation, you have to think about the greater danger theory. If I don't take the shot on the shooter, are more people going to die than if I miss the shot and unfortunately hit an innocent bystander? That's a personal decision you're going to have to make, and it's something you're going to have to live with. I'll tell you that active shooter response has evolved considerably since Columbine. And you really have to understand the history of active shooters. I mean, if you go back to Columbine, our law enforcement response then was to surround, wait for SWAT, and then go in, maybe. Try to negotiate to get the guys out if possible. Then we said, well, the first handful of officers that arrive on scene need to form up a team and immediately go in and engage that shooter. And now we've evolved, and what I'm trying to push is, yes, it's great to have a few officers to go in, but most likely it's going to be 1, maybe 2, and we need to train our officers on single and dual officer response to active shooters. But now you have the armed citizen factor. What do you do? Now, something that we've always taught in our classes, and I know there's some other great instructors out there that are doing the same, is, we talk about mall scenarios or anything out in public. What happens if there's a plainclothes or off-duty police officer, or even another well-intentioned concealed carry license holder that mistakes you for the bad guy. It's very likely. And let me tell you, when it comes to active shooter response, what we train for and what every law enforcement officer in this country is trained to do is to make entry, to move past victims. We're not going to stop and help you. If there's shooting going on, we're going to go to the sound of gunfire directly, and we're going to shoot the person with the gun. And that's something you need to think about. If you're standing there holding a gun or engaging the bad guy, there's a good chance that you're going to be mistaken for a bad guy yourself and unfortunately get shot. However, I know no police officer that wants to shoot an innocent person, and I can tell you, me personally, from my law enforcement background, that I don't want to prevent people from standing up and defending themselves and their loved ones. I just want you to understand what may happen so you can be better prepared to deal with it when it does happen. So if you're in an active shooter situation, you're engaging the bad guy, you need to try to be cognizant of law enforcement response. It's going to be very hard to do, and you're not going to have a lot of time to do that. But if you see police officers arrive, or if you're given commands by law enforcement, you need to immediately comply with it. And there's still a chance that you're going to get shot because we don't have to give you warnings. We're responding to shooter or shooters. We don't know. We see a man with a gun. We're trained to take that person out.
Mm-hmm. So is there any I've heard the argument, it's a Facebook argument or whatnot, for having some identifier that identifies you as a concealed carry good guy. I personally am completely against, law-abiding citizens having concealed carry badges or anything like that. But what would be a good way in that scenario to avoid getting shot as best as possible if you're pinned down and literally having a shootout with the bad guy and the police arrive on scene, apart from dropping your weapon and putting your hands up, which would, could seriously endanger them and you. What would you suggest for that person to think through well beforehand rather than some of these ridiculous videos that they have from companies down in Florida that push, everybody should have a badge, which is just, that's just trouble. So give me some thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, badges or any kind of shiny identifier like that is not a good idea. All you have to do is look at large cities where you have large police forces and you have on-duty police officers accidentally shooting off-duty police officers. It happens on a regular basis. It's unfortunate. That badge is not going to do anything to help you. If anything, it's only going to get you into trouble. As far as your question goes, that's a tough question. I don't know that there is a good answer to that. I would suppose that if you're out with somebody, a spouse or a friend, you should always have talked about what would happen in a situation like this or any situation where you need to draw your gun. And somebody then, if possible, should make that 911 call and say, hey, my wife or my husband, has a gun, is defending themselves, is defending us. Here's what they're wearing. Here's where we're at. Give that information to dispatch. But I'll tell you, if you listen to the dispatch tapes from any of these active shooter incidents, it's chaos. You have very good dispatchers, but they can't get all that information out, and all the police officers aren't necessarily hearing it. So again, I think it comes down to making that personal decision to be a sheepdog, to say, you know what, I can't get out of here. I need to defend myself or those that I'm with, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to take out that bad guy. And there's a chance that the bad guy's going to shoot me, and there's a chance that I could get hurt by responding law enforcement officers, and that's a risk I'm willing to take.
Mm-hmm. We're in a state now that is kind of going through some transitions with the law that just recently passed back in November and just started becoming implemented. As few as 8 months ago, people started getting their concealed carry licenses in the mail. One of the big things that is on the docket for change is this rule. There's emergency rules in place right now for training requirements. You're a trainer. I'm a huge advocate of training, but I am also not into government red tape and having them dictate to us necessarily what we need to do. I've done a lot of training myself. I spend a lot of time at the range. I own land, and so I spend a lot of time putting lead down range in my backyard. I have several outbuildings that I've modified into training areas more for fun, kind of like a paintball thing, except for it's not with paintball. It's with the little 6mm plastic bullets, but just continuing to do things that train. I also listen and watch a lot of video and audio, and one of the best that I've come across is Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, who came up with this whole idea of the sheepdog concept, and he also goes through some of the training on, if you are shot, how to survive that, and the mental preparedness of those types of things, to slow your body's heart rate and the blood flow, and just things like that he's teaching people in the military and police forces, and helping them to understand these things. And now he's bringing it to the civilian population as well. If you ever have an opportunity for our audience to listen to him, or buy a tape, or get a DVD or something on his talks, I would highly recommend it. And I don't know, Dominic, if you've had a chance to see him in person. I know he was in the area in Wisconsin with, I think it was USA Carry or another organization that brought him in. And so I know a lot of people in Wisconsin were able to check him out earlier this year. But between him and Rob Pincus, they're two of my favorite trainers that are off in cyberspace. But I've been able to just implement a lot of really neat things that I've learned from them that I think are so important, and it all kind of ties together with what you're doing. Any thoughts on your favorite mentor as a trainer who you look to as a great example?
Well, I have a lot of great mentors, and I'm very grateful. I don't even think I could name all of them. But let me back up a minute. I am also a big fan of training. Obviously, I own a training company, but I always like to just make it very clear that I always have and always will be a supporter of constitutional carry everywhere in this country. I believe that the good citizens of this country will make good decisions for what fits their personal lifestyle. And I think we have to trust people that they will seek out whatever training that they feel that they need. And, more times than not, they're going to do the right thing. So I don't believe in mandated training. It's unfortunate that our Department of Justice continues to push for changes. However, we're going to just have to deal with what we've got at this time. And as things evolve and we show that we are a very good subset of the population, us concealed carry license holders, I think it'll be easier for us to make the push for constitutional carry. And it's a fight that I'm never going to give up personally. Now, when we talk about good trainers, Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, is phenomenal. He's a very good motivational speaker, and he has some very good tips. And I would recommend any of his books on combat, particularly, and on killing as well. Pincus does some good things. I mean, there's a lot of places to go where you can learn things if you're willing to have an open mind. And not everybody's got all the answers. So you might learn something unique from one person and then find a twist on it from another. And you have to figure out how that fits into who you are as a person and what your skill level is and where you want to be. So always keep an open mind. And I commend you for what you're doing. I mean, you're taking time, personal time, to seek out video and audio, and then going out on your own property and training as well. And I think that that's great. And I think that there's a lot of people doing that, and I support that 100%.
Yeah. It can get a little expensive, but bottom line, it's just a lot of fun. It's one of the things that some people go fishing, some people go to the mountains, and I like to hunt, and I like to fish, and I like to shoot guns, and it's just real enjoyable. And I also have a son who's up and coming to the age where he's getting interested in archery and shooting sports, and so I'm introducing him to gun safety as well as my daughter, and I look forward to the day where we'll be able to do some training together in a capacity that he can understand, and I think that day's coming sooner than later under the circumstances of the culture. I don't think I want to expose him to unnecessary knowledge of the evil that's out there, but to the extent that I think he's ready to do it, There's been instances in the news in the last 6 months where kids as young as 9 and 10 and 11 have successfully, with a firearm, warded off a break-in violent attack for their family and saved their sister's life, and I think it was a mom and a sister in another case. And so to play off that, someone's too young to have gun knowledge is just setting them up for failure and potentially setting them up for a gun accident. So we, as young as 4 or 5 years old, working with play guns, they knew gun safety. They know not to touch firearms. They know the rules of gun safety. And so I'm just looking forward to that. It's a lot of fun for me, and it's not a lot of work for me to go out and train. I don't look at it as training as much as it's a recreational thing. So, and it's nice to have a little land, so I'm not paying to get into a club or something like that. I can just go out in my backyard. So,
I have a piece of advice for the listeners that do have kids. Yeah, absolutely. What you're doing is great. You need to teach your children as soon as they're aware of firearms, what they are, and all the rules of gun safety. But I have one tip that I think is really important. You need to tell your children and your grandchildren, if you have that they can ask you at any time about your guns, and that if they're curious about them and they ask you, you will stop whatever you're doing and show them the guns and answer their questions. Mm-hmm. This is a very important thing. I don't care if you're in the middle of a good book, you're watching a TV show, or something else that you feel is really important. If your kid or grandkid comes up to you and says, hey, I'm curious about your pistol, can we look at it? You stop whatever you're doing immediately, and you take the time to do that, to show that kid the gun and what it's about and answer any questions that they have. Curiosity kills. Yeah. And if we don't satisfy that curiosity in a positive way, that's where we're going to have tragedies. So just take the time, do it right, and make sure that the kids know that anytime they want to look at a gun or have questions about a gun, that you will immediately take time out of your day to do that and to help them with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I've done that a number of times with my kids. He hasn't asked in a long time, but we do have a standing rule that if he wants to look at the gun, that Dad needs to be there, and that he's able to do that. And we go through, and every single time we clear it, we make sure it's empty. He does all of that and make sure that it's safe, and then he can look at it and ask any question. And it actually is something that is kind of a bonding moment with your son. I didn't have that with my dad. He was not a gun guy. He wasn't into that kind of thing. And so my knowledge of guns, as I've talked about in other episodes, really came in kind of a negative light. And there were some encounters with guns in like my 6th grade year where I found it ended up being a BB gun, but at the time I didn't know it was a BB gun, and I didn't know exactly what to do with it, so I stuffed it in my bag on the way to school. It was, on the way to school, it was laying on the ground, and I brought it into the school and left it in my bag, and couldn't wait to get home to check it out and stuff. And I mean, just stupid stuff like that, where if someone would have told me, man, if you ever find a gun, here's what you do, and never, to take it into a school, that could have ended my 6th grade through 12th grade year. I would have never been able to go to public school. So, how things have changed from when you could take your hunting rifle to school and stick it in your locker so you can hunt on the way home, to now if you have a nail file, you might get expelled for the rest of your life. It's quite a different life and reality. So, well, I want to ask you a little bit about some of the training programs that you have at your company, because you obviously have a lot of experience. You've got a background in law enforcement, and you've got really good not only good trainers but good programs. And as I'm thinking through these scenarios of what's happened, I put it out on Facebook and asked people what kind of training they're getting. And by and large, people are seeking out these more scenario related type of training. I don't know what you would call it, but I guess it's more of like an active shooter type of a training that you're dealing with the chaos and things like that, rather than just carrying and being at the grocery store and dealing with a robbery. They're two different scenarios. And so what kind of training are you offering? What are some of your classes? I guess this is a chance where you get to toot your own horn and tell the listeners about what's out there, what you would recommend, and just a little bit about that. And we have a little bit of time left to discuss that, and then you can also tell us where to find you, and if people are in your area, how they can get into one of your classes. So tell us a little bit about what you got going on with Advanced Protection.
Sure. We just opened up a 5,000 square foot training facility in Endeavor, and we did that. We still go on the road. We love to go out and travel the state and meet people and go to the gun clubs and do training wherever we can. But we opened this facility because that reality-based training is something that we feel is really, really important. And we want to put people into scenarios and let them do what they need to do. We can pull vehicles into our training center. We can beat that building up. We can do whatever we need to do inside there to help people prepare for what they want to prepare for. So it gives us a lot of flexibility, and it's something that we're very excited to have. It's not sexy. It's functional. You're going to get hot. You're going to get dirty, but you're going to get an education. And I think that that's really, really important. And I also want to say that we do not think that we are, the end-all, be-all of training. There's a lot of good trainers out in Wisconsin and in this country. And if you don't want to come to one of our classes, I urge you to seek out our competition and to see what other options are out there. And if you are an instructor, we've always held out our hand and said, look, let's work together. If you need help with something, if you have questions about something, if there's a way that we can better what we're doing so we can better serve the armed citizens, let's do that. So if you're an instructor, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help you in any way that we can, including offering up use of our facility. So what do we offer for training? We do our standard concealed carry training. And I'll tell you, we were holding a lot of scheduled classes, and we taught a lot of people. What I found is that there's a huge demand for private training, one-on-one or couples training. So that's what people are really contacting us for is, hey, can you get my wife and I, or my girlfriend and I, or my husband and I, a few hours, and we want to go through a couple of things. So we're doing a lot of that, and that's really keeping us busy. But I've put together a couple of interesting classes, and one of them that I'm very excited about has been kind of in the works for a while, and I just launched it within the last week or so. And we're calling it Active Shooter Response, Tactics for the Armed Citizen.
All right, there you go.
I think this is an important class. It's going to be a combination of classroom and scenarios. And so, the questions you have to ask yourself are, one, are you familiar with the history and tactics of active shooters? It's important to understand kind of what's happened in the past so you can have an idea as to how you need to react if you're ever in that situation. And what do you do if you're in proximity to an active shooter? What are the good things and what are the bad things that you can do? And what should you do or not do in the aftermath of an active shooter incident? Things that we kind of talked about earlier in the show. What do you do when you're standing there holding a gun and the whole world of law enforcement is coming into that building? So you have to know what your actions are. The topics that we're going to cover, aside from the history, is areas of vulnerability. Where do you go that put you at the most risk of being involved in an active shooter situation? What about emergency planning at home, at work, and when you're out in the public? And that's something that needs to carry over to your friends and your family. What kind of gear should you carry? Now, we talked about flashlights. Some people like lasers. Obviously, extra ammunition and guns are great. But there's some other things that you can carry that could be a benefit in that situation. We love to talk about situational awareness. It's one of our favorite topics, and mindset, of course. We talk about the recommended actions are retreat, shelter in place, or engage. We go into a lot of detail on that and what's right and what's not right. We talk about legal considerations, of course. Improvised weapons are important. Not everybody's carrying a gun. While this class is focused on the armed citizen, if somebody doesn't carry a gun, they would still do well to attend this training because we do talk about improvised weapons. And there's weapons that you have probably within reach while you're listening to the show that you don't even realize are very effective weapons. And one of the things that's really important is emergency first aid under fire.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what I said, police officers are not going to stop and help you. I understand that the lieutenant in this most recent shooting here in Wisconsin was shot while tending to a victim. The shooting had stopped, so it was not really an active shooter situation at that very time. His actions should not be criticized. He was doing what he needed to do at that time. But most of the time, we're going to move right past you while you're begging us for help. You need to take responsibility to help yourself. So we're going to tell you about tourniquets. We're going to talk about stopping blood, sucking chest wounds, all the things that you need to do to survive for those crucial minutes until help can arrive.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about the psychological and physiological considerations of self-defense and active shooters. And then we go into doing scenarios and simulations. We're going to do force on force with airsoft. We do have a simulator, a video simulator, and there's some other dry fire type things that we can do as well. So people will be getting shot at with airsoft. Now, we don't use the airsoft that you can get in the big box stores. We use high-end airsoft that actually has to be imported into the country. It's very true to life, and if you've been shot with it. So
right.
We cover a lot of things. It's an 8-hour class. My guess is it'll probably go even a little longer than 8 hours. We're keeping class size down to a 10-person limit, so everybody can get the opportunity to move through the scenarios and to really get an education. We have one class scheduled for that, and that's on September 15th at our facility in Endeavor. We will hold additional classes after that, and we can even bring that class to you or to your group. So that's one that I'm really excited about and is obviously most pertinent right now to what's going on in the world. And then we have some other ones. We have a knife fighting class called Knife Combatives, bringing a special instructor up from Georgia. He's an air marshal and just a really accomplished instructor. And then day 2 of that training is principles of disarms and weapon retention. Also bringing that instructor up from Georgia from that, and we work together and kind of co-teach the class. So we've got some unique classes coming, and like I said, a lot of our training nowadays is private training. And if you want us for 8 hours and it's just you, we'll find a way to make it work for you. If I could do this for free, I would, but my wife would kill me.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good point, and you touched on so many things I can't even remember what I wanted to go back on. But one thing that the first aid comment was something that resonated with me. I just watched a video online. Rob Pincus had put a video on of a mock accident at the gun range where he actually had a person who had a prosthetic leg, and they simulated shooting the foot and did the whole scenario of what they're going to do, who's going to do whatever. And it was amazing how many people in the comments of this video on YouTube said, man, I never even thought about bringing a first aid kit to the range, and had no way of dealing with a shot. The chances that you're going to get shot while you're shooting are slim, but they're much more possible than if you're not shooting. And most of the comments were like aha moment. Wow, that's a raw concept. I'm going to do that from now on. I happen to be trained in first aid, and I was a lifeguard, so I have a pack, like a first aid bag, and I have that with me all the time. It's in my car, but it's accessible pretty quickly, and it's got more than the average first aid kit. But in that situation, it's got some trauma stuff in there and some things that I've added since I started carrying a weapon, because of the fact that you never know if it could be an accident, or you could come on a car accident, or you could come on an active shooter scenario where the shooting is stopped and now it's time to triage and actually start doing some hands-on bloody work. And you just never know. So I have a fairly well-packed trauma first aid kit available, and I would highly recommend that. It could be invaluable. And Unfortunately, I've been on the scene where I've been the first responder to a number of different scenarios, a couple car accidents where I've literally held people until the ambulance got there. And it's gross and it's bloody, and it's nowhere near what it would be like in the event of a gunshot. And thank God I've never had to deal with a gunshot wound. But my brother's a medic in the Army and was in Afghanistan. He flew with Blackhawks, and he was the first responder, so to speak. And we've had lengthy discussions on real trauma, and some of the stories that he was willing to share with me made me just so thankful for those people who can deal with that without losing it, because it's pretty grotesque. So from that, obviously training, and then precautions and safety first. And there's so much that we could go into, and obviously we can't. Before I let you go, I just wanted to mention that we're just not able to cover a lot of the breaking news types things. And so if you're interested in breaking news items, make sure you're a friend on Facebook by liking our Facebook page. I spend a lot of time updating that with current events and things that are happening, like the UN Arms Treaty, the George Zimmerman case. There's the different shootings that have happened, and also some of the training that I have experienced. I post videos and things like that and commentaries on the blog and things like that. So get involved. Make sure that if you have a question or comment, you feel free to contact me through the feedback hotline that I gave earlier. That's all right on the front page of concealedwisconsin.com. Now, Dominic, I want to give you a chance to give your contact information, because I think you have such a valuable training tool available inside of Wisconsin that I want people to be able to take advantage of that. So how do people get a hold of you and get into one of these classes?
There's several ways you can get a hold of us. I will say that at this time, our website is up. I'm in the process of redesigning it, making it a lot more user-friendly. But the website is www.apgwi.com. So Advanced Protection Group Wisconsin. So apgwi.com. We are on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/apgwi. And you can reach us on the telephone at 608-218-4636 or 855-WI-CARRY, 855-WI-CARRY. And we, I think we're regulars on your page too, Andy, so I'm sure people can go there on Facebook and find us as well. We're here to help you out, whether you're an instructor or an armed citizen or a law enforcement officer. We want to get you training. If you have trouble affording training, give us a call. We do offer scholarships and find ways to make it work for people. And remember, we can come to you or you can come to us. We just want to help you out.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate that. It's so important to seek out your own training. And all this information I will put on the show notes for episode 11 of Concealed Wisconsin Radio. And so you can just go to concealedwisconsin.com and look for the episode 11. And it's going to all be laid out, all the contact information, as well as links to these different classes and things like that. We're going to close out the show now, and I just want to thank you again for being a part of the show, Dominic, and for taking time to just share some of the insights that you have to current events. I'm sure we could talk for another 3 hours. There is so much going on right now in the world, and we need to be on top of our game. But amongst all the things that are happening around us, I want to stress that we need to be aware of our surroundings. And if we're able to legally carry a firearm, my encouragement is to carry deep, train hard, and don't ever leave home without your gun. That's going to wrap up this episode, and I want to thank everyone for listening to Concealed Wisconsin's radio. Again, please check out the show notes for this episode at concealedwisconsin.com. Visit all the links mentioned to see how you can get more involved. Concealed Wisconsin is a unique online community, and we encourage you to become part of it. Head on over to concealedwisconsin.com, leave us a comment, become a fan on Facebook, or subscribe to us on YouTube. Remember, you can always listen online, download it to your computer, or take us on the go by subscribing on iTunes. Check out all the links at concealedwisconsin.com. Thanks for listening. Now carry on.